Hello, and welcome to the Gamer's Closet. I'm your host, Douglas Weed, and today we're going to be talking about Ulcers. Ulcers is a game manufactured in 1969 by Waddington Games. It runs for about 90 minutes of game time, seats anywhere from 2 to 4 players, and is rated for ages 10 and up. But let's dig into it a little further, shall we? Waddington Games released the game of Ulcers in 1969. From the Waddington ad, it states, "Ulcers is the big business game that recognizes an important business fact. People are among a company's most valuable assets, and people are exactly why executives get ulcers. Suppose you had to form a company and hire a staff of executives, managers, salespeople, and secretaries. You would probably think it would be easy, but it isn't. Ulcers puts you in the owner's chair. You form a company, hire a staff, and try to keep them on." The early editions of the game had all-female secretaries and all-male hire personnel. Later editions kept the illustrations but shuffled them throughout the various positions. Ulcers was initially released in English and French, and a Portuguese edition was later issued for Portugal and Brazil. The game was reissued out by Waddington's in 1985, and also then renamed Top 7 by Jumbo Games, which was released in Dutch, English, French, German, Italian, and Swedish. This game does come with multiple pieces. It comes with an instruction booklet, 1 game board, comes with 22 people cards, which are 3 presidents, 3 vice presidents, 3 sales managers, 7 salesmen, and 7 secretaries, 22 ulcer cards, 4 player staff sheets in red, yellow, blue, and green, 2 green wooden dice, 4 player pawns, again in red, yellow, blue, and green, and a stack of money. The stack of money consists of 40 $5,000 bills, 40 $10,000 bills, and 40 $50,000 bills. To set up this game, each player chooses a color, and then each player gets $50,000 and a company. The companies are the funny long cards with little squares on them. The idea is to get a full staff of personnel for your company before anyone else does. To get a full staff of personnel, you need 2 secretaries, 2 salesmen, 1 sales manager, 1 vice president, and 1 president. In a 2, 3, or 4 player game, just be sure to adjust the number of employees in the personnel pool to the number of players in the game. The personnel pool is the space in the center of the board that says, "Place all personnel cards here." For 2 players, it should contain 4 secretaries, 4 salesmen, 2 sales managers, 2 vice presidents, and 1 president. For a 3-player game, 6 secretaries, 6 salesmen, 3 managers, 3 vice presidents, and 2 presidents. And for a 4 or more player game, 7 secretaries, 7 salesmen, 3 sales managers, 3 vice presidents, and 3 presidents. Pick 1 player to look after the bank. They give each player their company card and $50,000, which consists of 3 $10,000 bills and 4 $5,000 bills. Pictured here is the large oversized money from the Jumbo Euro version of this game. Players each select a colored marker, which they place on the square marked New Fiscal Year. Roll the dice to see who goes first. Player rolling the highest number then rolls again and moves their marker clockwise by the number of squares shown on the dice. To hire personnel, land on the squares marked Secretary, Salesman, Sales Manager, Vice President, or President. Each time you land on one of these squares, you may hire the employee from the personnel pool. Land on a secretary square, you may hire 1 secretary. Land on a salesman square, you may hire 1 salesman, and so on. Should you land on any of these squares and find no corresponding employees in the personnel pool, do not worry. There is a far more devious way of hiring staff. When you have to pay your employees, this is where the game gets into full swing. You may pay your employees any amount marked on your company card, from $5,000 to $200,000. This amount must be paid immediately to the bank. There is just one restriction upon how much you must pay your personnel. No employee can earn less than an employee of a lower rank. That is, a president may earn the same as a vice president, and of course they may earn more, but under no conditions may they earn less. Similarly, the vice president may not earn less than a sales manager, and so on down the line. When you hire an employee, place them in the square on your company card, which corresponds to the amount you've paid. The next type of square I need to talk about are the raid squares. This is where the game gets dirty. When you land on a raid square, you may take any employee from another player simply by offering them a raise. Suppose an opponent has a salesman earning $15,000. You may take that employee by moving them up to the next wage bracket, which is $20,000. Pay this full amount to the bank and put the salesman in the $20,000 square on your company card. You may raid only one opponent of one employee on each trip to a raid square. If you don't wish to raid, you just simply don't have to. You cannot stop anyone from raiding, but you can make it more difficult from them. Just keep a close eye on how much opponents are paying their employees. For example, say two of them have sales managers. One is earning $15,000 and one is earning $20,000. You'd be wise to pay your sales manager $30,000. In this way, when someone raids, they'll probably raid one of the low-price sales managers and leave yours alone. The next square I want to talk about is the scandal square. If you land on it, it means you must pay the bank $25,000 to keep the scandal hushed up, or fire your top-ranking male employee and a secretary. I think you get the idea of where this is going. The next type of square I want to talk about is the payroll square. The payroll square means trouble. If you land here on a normal turn, or if you were sent back here for not meeting your obligations on a salary square, you must pay the total wages of every employee in your company to the bank. If you don't have the money, you must take the detour and obey the instructions on each square you hit. Roll one die and keep rolling in the same turn until you are through the detour and back out onto the other side. Any employees you lose are returned immediately to the personnel pool. The same rules apply to the factory staff on strike hazard on your opponent's side of the board. You either pay or you go through. Now, a couple of questions may come up out of this. First, what if I can't afford the strike violence? Well, who can? But if you land on this square in either the payroll detour or the strike detour, you must pay $10,000 or go back to the beginning of the detour and immediately start through again. This way you run the risk of losing even more of your personnel. The other question you may ask, why did you say go back to the square marked payroll? Because if you went the other way, you'd pass the new fiscal year square and collect $50,000 on your way. Any person who won't pay their employees hardly deserves this kindness. The next square I want to talk about is the taxes square. The taxes square can be deadly only if you've got the money. When you land here, roll both dice and pay 5 times the number you roll. If you don't have this much money, pay whatever you have and be grateful. Even the government doesn't let you off this easy. The next type of square I want to talk about is the business venture square. The object of Ulcers is not to see who can make the most money, but let's face it, money will help you hire employees and keep them. The business venture gives you a quick filling at some easy cash. When you land on business venture squares, you may invest in any multiple of 10,000, 20,000, or 30,000. Place this money in front of you and roll one die. Keep rolling in the same turn until you are through the business venture detour and back out onto the other circle. Your investments is affected by each square you land on. So if a player rolled nothing but ones on a die after investing $10,000, their investment would double to $20,000, then triple to $60,000, then be cut in half to $30,000 again, double again to $60,000, and triple to $180,000, then be cut again in half to $90,000 and be wiped out to zero. By landing only on the good squares, it's possible to build a $10,000 stake into $360,000, although if you do this too often, the other players may demand to have a look at your dice. The final space I want to talk about is the Take an Ulcer card. Ulcer cards are the stack of cards that happen to be next to the personnel cards. These cards may be kept until you wish to use them. They may also be sold or traded. If a card is not used immediately, it may be used in place of a regular turn later on in the game. The special raid cards allow you to raid players on your left or right. If only two players are playing, these cards allow you to raid your opponent no matter where they may be sitting. Couple of questions about employees that may come up. First, can employees be sold or traded to other players? The answer to that question is no. After you've hired someone, can you give them a raise later on? Yes, you can promote as many employees as you wish during any regular turn before you roll the dice. To raise a $5,000 employee to $10,000, just pay the bank the difference of $5,000 to the bank. And finally, should you pay your employees as much as possible to prevent other players from raiding them? The answer to that is yes as well. But remember, there are salary squares. When you land on these, you must pay the bank full salaries of your employees named on those squares. If you don't have the money to meet those salaries, you must go back to the square marked payroll and take the detour through. The final question that may come up is, what happens if I lose all my money? Well, not too much. Just after you leave the business venture detour, you'll pass the new fiscal year square and collect $50,000, $100,000 if you're lucky enough to land right on the square. In Ulcers, you may find yourself broke from time to time. This just means you can't hire employees or raid. And you may lose some staff if you land on a salary square and have to go back to the payroll detour. Finally, to win this game, be the player who first accumulates a full staff, which is 2 secretaries, 2 salesmen, 1 sales manager, 1 vice president, and 1 president, and get safely around to the new fiscal year space. This last point is important as it allows the other players 1 or 2 more chances to raid what might otherwise be a sure winner. It also makes for a very exciting finish. Well, this has been an overview of Ulcers. Now, I think Ulcers is a very aptly named game because it does cause a lot of headaches and it's not a great game. Now, that being said, first off, thematically it looks nice. It has some nice cards, it has some nice art to it, the board is a nice orderly structure, it has nice wood pieces. I think thematically, it looks nice. It has little cardboard business pieces, so for what it is, I would say it looks really nice. Now, that being said, I have a couple of issues with this game. First off, this game has multiple editions. The first edition has female characters regulated to secretaries and male roles in higher business. Second edition, they juggled the photos around so that way they made it more streamlined. So I think that's a nice improvement on the game because the first edition game has that nice, it's a little cringy. It kind of reminds me of like Mad Men or something like that with the 60s acumen. The second thing about this game is it has a sexual scandal space where you have to pay so much money to the bank or you have to fire your highest rated male employee and a secretary, which I think is still kind of cringy. That being said, it's a well-paced game, so it does move at a nice speed, but you do pick up a lot of dead spaces, where if you've hired 2 secretaries already and you don't need another secretary and you land on a secretary space, it doesn't really do anything. So you will be basically rolling, moving, rolling, moving, rolling, moving, and it's just over and over again. The cards add a nice touch. They give a more strategic element where you can actually force raids on people, or instead of doing die rolls, you can move a certain number, which I think adds a nice strategic edge to the game. But my other issue with this game, it does have a financial structure set up where you can put money into a pot like through the stock market and then try to double or triple your money, or you can lose money where it'll cut it in half or lose it altogether. The game runs with $5,000, $10,000, and $20,000 bills, which, I'm sorry, not $20,000, $50,000 bills, which is not conductive for if you have to cut it in half because you can't really divide 5,000. There's no $1,000 bills in this game, so it makes it a little hard to adjust how money works in that, and you have to have the conversations with the other players to see how you want to run that, because there are actually no rules in the game for what to do if you have to divide 15,000 in half, because there's no ones or anything less than that. I would say it's a good game if you want to play as a game night with friends. It's different, it's novel. I don't know of many games that require you to build a company and not have to worry about money to win the game. As for a family game night, because younger players, it has that sexual scandal space, and it has a little bit of cringiness still to it. I would find another game. It's not. I would say it's not a game I would expose younger children to right away because they might not be able to get a good grasp on it, and may lead to further questions that you may not want to have to deal with. But if you have friends of age that want to play for like a friend's game night, I'd say it's a good option. But overall, I would say Ulcers is a game that will give you ulcers. It's not a great game. It runs for 90 minutes. If you want to find it, it's online anywhere from about $20 to $40, so it's still relatively easy to find. It was produced in England and Canada. There are copies floating around, so you can still find it relatively easy. But if you haven't played Ulcers before, I'd say it's worth at least playing once. But other than that, I would find a different game. So overall, I do not recommend playing this game. Well, that's it from us here at the Gamer's Closet. We'd like to thank you for checking out our video on Ulcers from Waddington Games. If there's a game in the future you'd like us to review or go over, please put it in the comments below. Please hit subscribe so that way you can be the first to check out our future content. And as always, please have a great gaming day.